A reading from Christ and Sophia by Valentin Tomberg. The Holy Spirit and the Sophia, the Saga of the prophet Ezekiel. When we study the history of human cognition, we find that a problem runs through the history as an unbroken thread concerning the common source of the outer world and human consciousness. The cosmic godhead in relation to the world and humanity was, and ever will be, the most important question for earthly humanity. Since the moment of the birth of thought, this question has been answered in various ways, but, regardless of how manifold the answers to the question may be, apart from atheism, which is a manifestation of spiritual disease rather than knowledge, they may ultimately be combined into three categories. The Godhead may be considered pantheistically, theistically, or deistically. It is the cosmic entity in itself, or it guides the universe it has created from outside, or it is the creative being at rest above the universe who, having created the world, has lost interest in its fate. In the first instance, we have the Godhead of all consciousness, enlightening the world and all life that flows through the currents of the world. In the second, we have the highest being with whom humankind is confronted. In the third, we have the transcendental originator of the cosmic system present in the cosmos, the same way a watchmaker is present in the constructed watch. These views depend on certain basic feelings that are peculiar to human souls in their views of life. One soul feels inundated and irradiated by the divine. Another has the experience, as an independent being, of confronting the divine in free exchange. And yet another feels neither the flow of the divine in the cosmos nor its revelations in free interaction, but merely a memory of the divine as the rational principle that governs the universe. Those who hold these fundamental conceptions often stand in irreconcilable opposition, believing that the truth of their own view unmasks that of the other as mistaken. Thus, the pantheist views the theistic concept of God as anthropomorphic. The theist regards the pantheistic concept as naturalistic and vague, and both reject the concept of a deist, like Voltaire, as an insubstantial abstraction. The deist, on the other hand, considers both the other concepts unscientific and philosophically unsound. Real Christianity, however, means more than preaching peace. In truth, it brings peace into the conflict of ideas. The Christian idea of God, the three in one, which is really the view of God taught through the holy wisdom of the primal mysteries, is a concept in which deists, theists, and pantheists can all clasp hands in friendship. The light of the Christian Trinity reveals that a deist acknowledges only the Father, a theist only the Son, and, with the same exclusiveness, a pantheist stands for only the Holy Spirit. All three representations of these fundamental ideas of the Godhead are correct insofar as they say something positive, but they are wrong to the degree that they refuse to acknowledge other viewpoints. In fact, the Godhead dwells outside the course of world events, is present as the highest example for all beings in the world, and also flows and vibrates through all that exists. The threefold Godhead is the highest point to which human thinking can soar and find rest. It is the highest view that the human heart can grasp and that human beings can acknowledge with their whole being. But people must not assume that they can gain a true idea of the Trinity by only one path. They will never find the Trinity by devoting themselves entirely to the study of outer nature. That path leads only to recognition of the Father. And those who devote themselves solely to observing their own inner life will gain an idea of the Holy Spirit's universal power. but those who study the outer as well as the inner worlds, beginning with the question of what is lacking in the outer world and what is missing in the inner world, not asking what is present, but what is missing from the universe and humankind, will attain a cosmic concept of the sun. As a gaze directed reverently toward the source of consciousness and life must lead to recognition of the Holy Spirit, an observant, perceptive gaze directed to the outer world leads to conviction of the Father's existence, the Creator, to whom his work, displayed to perceptive insight, points. But a gaze that views with warm sympathy the misery and imperfection of life leads to certainty of the Son. Whenever piety is lacking in the soul, the Holy Spirit becomes merely an abstract concept. When truth is weak in courage, the Father cannot be acknowledged. And when there is no love in life, the Son cannot be confessed. To acknowledge the three in one means being able to soar aloft, to see life in a religious, objective and therapeutic way. Christianity confronts humankind with this claim when the idea of the Trinity is placed before us. The Father reveals himself neither in light nor in silent darkness, but through light and darkness. The direct experience of the Father being that is possible to humans on earth is confined to the experience of his activity in the alternation of highest happiness and deepest loneliness. One cannot know the inner repose of the soul that reflects the repose of the Father in heaven, unless one also knows both the bliss of ineffable clarity when the soul is illumined by the Spirit, and the indescribable loneliness of the soul, waiting motionless, like a ship with sagging sails in a dead calm, with no urge to action or perception. This repose is the human experience of the Father. It is this that makes people strong for the trials of life and death. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. The Holy Spirit is a light that illuminates consciousness in perceiving, making visible the objects of perception. We never read of knowing the Holy Spirit, only of being filled with the Holy Spirit. Human beings cannot experience a meeting with the Holy Spirit. One can only be filled inwardly with light. The Holy Spirit is always flowing through and irradiating all beings. Everyone is interpenetrated continually by the Holy Spirit. But people fail to notice this simply because the current of the Spirit's activity is not intercepted by one's consciousness. When this happens in such a way that the eye becomes the focus for the Holy Spirit's light, people are filled with the Holy Spirit. It's a condition of the greatest possible clarity and certainty in the knowledge of the great spiritual and moral questions of existence. Human beings simply acquire a much stronger light of consciousness than they possessed before. One becomes more awake. It is different for knowledge of the Son. A meeting occurs between a human being and the Son, in which the Son stands before one as an example. Such a meeting results from the attitude toward the universe and the life we have called therapeutic. We encounter the Son when we ask what is lacking in the universe. Jesus Christ speaks the significant words that faith can move mountains. Mountains are motionless simply because they have been deprived of the original will fire of ancient Saturn, and it is humanity's mission to restore to the mineral kingdom this fire that becomes faith as it passes through the human eye. The true yearning of the plant world is not exhausted in the mere aspiration that the sun should shine upon it, but extends to a desire that plants should have sunshine internally. The obedience of domestic animals to human beings is an instinctive expression of a hope. The animal world desires to become an effective force of active thought, the word. The fact that people think points to the fundamental condition behind their existence. That's the meaning of this existence has not been granted directly to humankind. If the meaning of life already lived in human consciousness, we would indeed direct our activities in accordance with it, but we would not look for it through thinking. What human beings need in order to be human in the truest sense of the word is to have the living presence of life's meaning within. The fall of both humankind and the kingdoms of nature provides knowledge of what has thus been lost. What is lacking in nature and man? The complete answer to this question is true humanity. For human beings to fully recognize their responsibility towards nature, they must take one very conscious step, that of fully recognizing their own imperfection as stunted, fallen human beings. And not until this recognition has taken place will humankind become fully alive to its responsibility. The process of this recognition has been described as the meeting with the lesser guardian of the threshold. The test of this encounter is that human beings should know themselves just as they have become because of the fall. Knowledge of one's nature as it has become leads us to knowledge of what we will become. Those who can enjoy the recognition of the stunted human will thus be led to realize true humanity. This full consciousness will then become the meeting with the sun. This encounter with the sun is for human beings an objective event in cognition. In it we encounter our archetype with perceptive recognition, and at the same time recognise that this is the archetype for all earthly beings, because within it is hidden the warmth, the light and the word for which the three kingdoms of nature yearn. It is in the character of the new Adam, the resurrected Adam Kadmon, that the sun meets the human being. This figure is not just an archetype to humankind, it is also an archetype to all the beings of the spiritual hierarchies, because there is something lacking even in those beings. What is lacking in them must be brought into their sphere of existence by humanity. the freedom that will have achieved its cosmic destiny once it has overcome karma in the universe. This is the desire of the beings of the higher hierarchies, but to bring it to pass they require the help of human beings. Only a blind earthly human being can annul the karmic consequences of the blindness of any other terrestrial human being. The higher hierarchic beings cannot do this, but they desire it so that the law of justice can be established through love to the very ends of the natural world. This can be accomplished only by incarnate humans, yet they will not do it because, since the fall, the will has been the evil element in human nature. Consequently, the will of the Son, revealing himself as the highest Elohim, is the highest example of love given to humanity. And thus, on the other hand, the power of the highest Elohim, previously becoming and now having become human, is the highest example for the beings of the spiritual hierarchies. The divine human is the evolutionary ideal of all beings in the universe, spiritual as well as earthly. In a certain sense, all spiritual beings strive to become human in the sense of having the power to overcome karma. But the task of humankind is to become divine, to absorb the divine love into the human will. Ezekiel recognized this central truth of the universe when he saw, as the center of his cosmic vision of the hierarchy of the Holy Spirit, the Son enthroned in the likeness of a man. No doubt he saw this archetypal picture prophetically as a cosmic purpose for the future, because at the time the Christ had not yet become human. But he saw it as the center of the sublime tableau of the activity of the Holy Spirit, directed toward the fulfillment of this purpose. If we study more closely the central figure of Ezekiel's vision by the river Chebar, Ezekiel 1:3, we find that this figure presents a certain answer to the question of existence asked by nature and humanity. The aspect missing in nature and humankind is contained in this figure. The various elements of the figure are those we have already mentioned as absent from nature and humankind. Ezekiel not only speaks of one in the likeness of a man, but also of the voice that sounds above the 4 cherubim, where the throne is set, and on which the one sits who has a human likeness. He speaks to a fire that shines in glowing metal in the limbs of the one who is like a human being, and finally of the light proceeding from him, like the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain. The true divine human countenance, the voice sounding above, the beings that represent the 4 group souls, the metallic fire and the light, these 4 elements that complete the central figure of Ezekiel's vision are precisely those of the essential gifts missing from the mineral, vegetable, animal and human kingdoms of the earth, for which all terrestrial beings are longing. The metallic fire of the limb system, or will, that is saw, is that warmth of will that the mineral kingdom lost at the fall of humankind. The light he saw gleaming in rainbow colours is the light for which the plant world has been yearning since Earth's severance from the sun. The voice that sounds above the group souls is the Word, the hope of all animal existence, and the divine human countenance is the image of the goal of all true earthly human effort. Ezekiel thus established a true image of the meaning of earthly existence for the future reader, that is, for the inspired cognition of future generations. And he did this as a Son of Man, by which title he is always addressed in the spiritual world. Son of Man represents a future condition of consciousness that will be born from the present consciousness as its posterity, or son. In this sense, therefore, man represents the four members of the human body: the physical body, the ether body, the astral body, and I being. Son of man, on the other hand, would indicate one who experiences and represents also the manas principle, the spirit self, as a fifth member. This was exactly the case with Ezekiel. It was not just because of the subject of his revelations that he lived in the future, but also because he was able to perceive and know it by means of this additional member belonging to the human being of the future. And the whole fundamental character of his revelation depends on this fact. In our 10th meditation, events of the Old Testament period of human spiritual history were described in general as an expression of thought, this thought. At that time, the Father was active in the destiny in which the Holy Spirit was preparing the birth of the Son. The second part of the sentence, in which the Holy Spirit was preparing the birth of the Son, contains the whole meaning of Ezekiel's vision at the river Chebar, up to the point where commissions destined for those around him were laid upon him. The vision shows the Son at the centre of the Holy Spirit's activity. All the incidental figures surrounding the central one are related to this activity. As we have shown, the Holy Spirit in his own nature cannot be an object of cognition. Activity can be recognised only through beings appointed to that end. The nature of the Holy Spirit at that time was filling Ezekiel himself, who was the subject of the cognition. It could not be at the same time its object. This is the condition expressed in the Bible by the words, "The hand of the Lord was upon him." The hand of God, therefore, was upon Ezekiel from the first moment of his visions. They were made possible by this hand. The activity of the Holy Spirit we're considering extends to all the hierarchies. Yet there are hierarchies that are united with the Holy Spirit in a particular sense. Just as the archangels Elohim and Seraphim represent the Son in a special way, the angels Dynamoi and Cherubim represent the Holy Spirit. They in particular fulfill the cosmic mission of the Holy Spirit, whereas other hierarchies have devoted themselves to the fulfillment of the mission set up in the cosmos by the Son and the Father. The mission of the Holy Spirit to incarnate human beings involves filling them with the light of consciousness, which, in its least clouded form, manifests in human thought. This light is a gift to human beings. We can freely use it or misuse it. Human beings can either freely subject their will to it, or, conversely, master it through the will, which works through misusing the light of consciousness. But however people use it, they owe every influx of the light of consciousness to that source which we know as the Holy Spirit. Before this light reaches humankind, it is worked upon by the spiritual hierarchies and brought down in such a way that human beings are able to endure it. 3 hierarchies in particular are concerned with bringing the light of consciousness to human beings: the cherubim, the dynamoi, and the angels. The cherubim breathe out light, radiating eternal light towards the material world. The dynamoi control the strength of their action in the human world, The angels guide the various beams of this light to human individuals. If the angels' activity were to fall away from this joint process, individual differences in the inner creation of the light of human consciousness would disappear. Everyone would simultaneously receive the same effect of the light without distinction of colour, quantity or epoch. Most human beings would be blinded by the white light of surging consciousness. If the activity of the dynamo were to fail, humanity would grow rigid in the light of eternity and stand breathless in the light of eternal stillness. Every movement would die away, making progress along the path of human evolution impossible. Humanity depends on the spiritual hierarchies, just as the hierarchies depend on one another. The angels rescue humankind not only from a complete darkening of consciousness of life in the material realm, but also from the blinding of consciousness by the direct, unmediated light of spirit. The spirits of motion add the power of movement or progress to the cherubim's eternal light. The cherubim radiate light into the dark material world, the light that flows from the eternal Trinity. The angels represent the light of the Holy Spirit as the ultimate end of its activity. In relation to the confines of darkness, they are literally the sons of twilight. They represent the many nearby eyes of the spiritual world directed toward earthly matters. An eye of the spiritual world, one's guardian angel, rests on each human being. No one is forgotten. The eye of God really does rest on every human individual. Not just an observing eye, an enlightening, irradiating eye. The angels not only have the task of recording what they see of the minds and actions of human beings, for the higher ones of the spiritual world, they must also bring word to humankind concerning the purposes and activities of the beings in the spiritual world. They are messengers, both for the world of the hierarchies and from the world of earthly humanity. Angels continually work to move the souls of earthly humanity in harmony with the great cosmic purpose. They try to bring the stirrings of human souls into consonance with the great cosmic impulses. Nevertheless, the great cosmic impulses originate especially in the hierarchy of the dynamo, or spirits of motion. It is these spirits who give the real force to the supreme light of wisdom. The impelling force of the dynamo must be mentioned, because they renounced their share in the evolution of this force. Their dynamic force must be seen as an activity that merely awakens longing, not as movement. It is Ahriman who moves beings dynamically, and Lucifer moves them through allurement. The dynamo, however, move beings on the paths found for them through their yearning for the light of the true, the beautiful and the good. The history of great cosmic yearning, from birth to fulfillment, is also the history of a certain cosmic evolutionary cycle. Thus, for example, the Earth, as the fourth evolutionary cycle, is essentially, from the fourth polarity epoch, the history of a particular cosmic longing that entered the stream of cosmic events with the fall of humankind. It received the hope of fulfillment in the mystery of Golgotha. We've tried to describe this longing. Now the point is to recognize its connection with the activity of the spirits of motion. Its cycles of movement are revelations of the spirit of motion. These cycles were also called wheels, roti, so that the spirits of motion may be spoken of as wheels, whose rims are full of eyes. The angels are the eyes on the rims of the dynamo's wheels. Encouraging movement, the activity of the dynamo is conditioned by the cherubim, who radiate the light of harmony in accordance with what the dynamo activate, longing. The spirits of harmony provide the substance of the yearnings of all beings. They reveal the archetype of harmonized humanity, the complete human being to humankind. But human beings are not harmonized unless the four members of their being are in harmony. The I must be allied with, not in conflict with, the astral, etheric and physical human. The language of primal occult symbolism would say that harmonious human beings have the human, the eagle, the lion and the bull in equilibrium with them. Those who are harmonized are ready to attain an even higher state, since harmonizing is a preliminary requirement for the entry to a higher force. Only the person of harmony can become a person of love. The four essential human forces must provide a stage for the fifth. Once the Holy Spirit has brought about the harmonizing of the human being, the time has come for the Son's birth. Once an earthly human organism has realized the archetype of the cherubim, the Son or Christ, it will be born on earth. But before this could happen, the history of Israel, as Ezekiel perceived, had to be continued in a certain direction. Ezekiel's mission developed out of the perception of how it had to be continued. The vision of Ezekiel represents one of the most valuable documents possessed by humanity, because it contains such specific information concerning the function of the Holy Spirit. In conjunction with these considerations, a question arises. If various methods and qualities of soul are needed to recognize the Father, perceive the Son, and acknowledge the Spirit, how does one perceive the Trinity as a unity? Is it possible to receive undivided wisdom, not just a combination of three different forms of perceptive knowledge gained by different means, but perception leading to a view that synthesizes the whole? This leads us to consider an important spiritual fact in Old Testament history by examining the nature and function of the Sophia. Who is Sophia? The Sophia is no abstract concept or merely a pious mystical state of mind, but an actual archangelic being who performs a particular spiritual task. A part of this special mission is the anticipatory manas revelation given through certain individuals. Various other beings are also involved in this revelation, but it is Sophia who brings about the revelation by means of which the unity of the Trinity and also the unity of the three occultisms becomes perceptible. For humankind, Sophia does not represent separate cognitions in distinct areas, but the knowledge of what gives meaning to all cognitions. Indeed, the separate cognitions, insofar as they do not serve practical purposes, have only the meaning of an alphabet by which the sublime cosmic mysteries of the Trinity may be read. The total knowledge of these mysteries, by which the temple of the universe is built and whose stones are the separate cognitions, is imparted by the Sophia, called the wisdom of God. The plan of the temple was drawn before the building was done. The wisdom was there as a whole, before wisdom-filled objects and processes came into being. Solomon expressed this when he put these words into the mouth of wisdom. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the depth. When he appointed the foundations of the earth. When I was by him, as one brought up with him. Wisdom hath builded her house, she hath hewn out her 7 pillars. For Solomon this is wisdom that speaks and builds, a master worker with God. Sophia. The house of Sophia. The complete knowledge of the plan for building the universe and one with the goals of evolution. The temple has stood since primeval times. It is the place of initiation of human souls. To enter it means simply to acquire the knowledge of the sublime plan of cosmic evolution. To be initiated does not mean to know all things. No one can do that, not even the beings of the spiritual hierarchies. It means rather to perceive in a single survey the main outline of the evolutionary movement of everything. This survey is made possible by the suprasensory buildings of the Temple of Wisdom, constructed on the lines of intuition. The buildings of the temple, if we can imagine them as visible shapes, form an inverted bowl, out of which the 7 streams of revelation flow. These streams are the pillars of the temple, and the bowl is in its dome. The 7 pillars of the house of wisdom, about which Solomon spoke, are also 7 paths or methods of absorbing the streaming contents of the bowl or the temple's dome. What we understand as logic is one of those streams, directed downward from above. When this stream reaches the conscious eye, real Aristotelian logic begins. But when the stream of logic is brought even lower by humans, down to the level of digestion, a certain type of logic does arise, but it is logic in which the stomach and the interests of the stomach determine the logic and conclusions. The basis for the logic of Marxism, for example, arose on this path. And if the stream of logic is brought even lower, into instinctual life, the peculiar type of logic as expressed by Freudian psychology arises. Logic can descend even further, and when this happens, human beings are beginning to use a type of logic that is directed from the subterranean spheres. This may even be an irrefutable logic, and may have an enormously convincing effect. And Rudolf Steiner has spoken of the rape of the cosmic intelligence by Ahriman. If the cosmic intelligence reaches the feet, through which the forces of the subterranean spheres work upward within an individual, then the cosmic intelligence or logic is stolen by Ahriman. One no longer thinks independently, but Ahriman thinks through that person. The part of the cosmic intelligence that has descended to the I being, and even lower, is the fallen Sophia, the Sophia Akhmoth of the Gnostics. The pure Sophia remains in the heights of the spirit worlds. During the present era, her work of revelation is under the protection of the Archangel Michael, who is the administrator of the cosmic intelligence, in the sense that he guides the whole revelation of the Sophia, so that it may be absorbed by the best forces of the human consciousness soul. He creates the bridge between the manas light and the consciousness soul by pouring strength of will into the moral essence of thought revelations. He strengthens the willpower of thinking, thus protecting it from intrusion, because it is difficult to introduce an alien content of will into a thought strengthened by Michael. During Old Testament times, the Sophia was equally active. This may be seen not just from the Proverbs of Solomon, but also the deeper fact of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, which represents the goal of Old Testament history. The activity of Yahweh Elohim, the archangelic being of Jesus, the immaculate sister soul of Adam, the Elijah being, the great Zoroaster and his disciples, Buddha, and finally the Sophia, all resulted in the human Jesus of Nazareth, who was able to absorb into himself the being of the Christ at the baptism in Jordan. That moment of the Jordan baptism is the boundary between the Old Testament history of humankind and the New Testament. Everything that preceded it belongs to the Old Testament section of history, and everything that followed belongs to the New Testament era of human history. It is the moment of the living consummation of a great past absorbing the living seed of a great future into itself. The purpose of our next study will be to bring this movement one step nearer to understanding.